FSU's new quarterback, Thomas Castellanos, was someone who kind of took college football by storm 2 years ago. In his first year starting, he surprised a lot of people with his athleticism and genuine ability to move the ball downfield with his arm, resulting in a QBR which was similar to two future Heisman candidates. His second year at Boston College proved less fruitful. That top 50-ish QBR fell precipitously to 111th. I wrote an article discussing the stats supporting this on Noles 247, which I'll link below. But the long and the short of it was that while his passing actually improved, he went from the third highest rushing QBR in the country to dead last. And that had mostly to do with a high fumble to touchdown ratio. I wouldn't necessarily put a ton of weight on that. While it did explain part of their struggles, you can look at a play like this, where he fumbles on the goal line, and see that this play alone resulted in a disproportionate drop in QBR. Is fumbling a concern? Yes. But fumbles are also not very predictive. One goal line fumble does not necessarily mean another is soon to come. But while I do believe that terrible rush QBR is a bit anomalous, the fact remains that he was a much less effective rusher this past season than he was the year before. Even on this graph of fumbles to rushing touchdowns compared to rushing EPA for quarterbacks, he's below the trend line. That's not good. This is where we have to leave stats behind. No, to untangle the mystery of the fall off of the rushing game, we need the film. So my first instinct was to just make sure that injury wasn't the root cause here. If an athlete at this level loses just a step, maybe a sore ankle or knee, that can dramatically reduce their effectiveness. The thing is, I don't really buy this to be the case. Firstly, his yards per scramble, not designed runs, but scrambles off passing plays, actually improved this past year. He also didn't really look much slower to the eye. I'll play 3 clips, 1 from this year and 2 from last year. Does any stand out to you as less athletic or injured? I'll tell you, it was the second clip that was last year. No, the root of the problem has to come from their change in offensive philosophy. Boston College transitioned from a spread offense to longtime NFL guy Bill O'Brien. That could not be more pro style. Plus, it was clear that O'Brien was not interested in a mobile quarterback. He benched Castellanos as soon as he could, and their designed quarterback rushes after that point went basically to zero. So that is my starting point. Bill O'Brien had to have been doing something to tamper with this run game, right? I doubt it was out of malice, but maybe just out of incompetence with this style of quarterback. In order to tease this out, we have to go to some of the most successful runs that Castellanos was able to pull off in 2023 and see how they were designed. They found a lot of success from these designed quarterback draws. The premise is pretty simple. Spread the defense out as wide as you can, run the defenders off, let the defensive line get greedy in pass rush lanes, and then Castellanos can show off his speed in open space. This worked, and it allowed Thomas Castellanos to find a ton of success that season on the run game. So when I turned on the tape from this past season, I expected to find the opposite. I expected the old NFL guy to load the field with 3 tight ends and these bunch power sets and try to power Castellanos' tiny frame through a loaded box. But that's not really what I saw. In fact, I saw the exact opposite. I saw the same formula that had been working the year before. I saw spread sets and quarterback draws. They just weren't working. The first thing that stood out to me was that the defensive line seemed to be able to shed better. And I decided to look into this, and really, the offensive line was the same unit as the season before. So I doubt they took a serious downturn, especially since the yards before contact for the running backs on run plays was actually slightly better last year. So there's little to support the notion that maybe the offensive line got worse or they didn't block these up as well. Maybe it was rhythm and practice. Maybe they just devoted less time to this play and the timing was off. These draws are pretty reliant on timing. But honestly, that doesn't feel too convincing. It feels a little hand-wavy. So I looked further, and upon further watches, I think the core of the problem is actually on the defensive side of the ball. Look at where the linebackers are on this successful draw from 2023. They expand outside the box. Now compare that to this past season. The linebackers' eyes are stuck on the backfield. They're ready for it. Now, we can explain this shift in defensive philosophy in two ways. The first is that defenses in 2023 had no idea that Castellanos was primarily a run threat, and they were very concerned with his passing abilities, and they were adjusting going into 2024. The thing is, I'm not buying that one. I don't think he was just figured out, mostly because there isn't a ton of figuring. Dude's an athlete, and he's going to run, and he's going to hurt you if you let him. The defensive play call numbers also don't back this theory. If you wanted to stop the run game or even running quarterback, you would typically go to a more middle of the field closed defense. This implies that you're rolling an extra person into the box to give that number against the run. Teams didn't really change their usage of middle of the field closed coverages, and even if they did, there wasn't a significant difference in how the quarterback run performed against either coverage style. So if it wasn't play calling, there had to be something about how the offense was set up as a whole that led to this second level not having to be honest in the run game. And when I think of making defenses honest to the run, we have to look at how they passed. Last season, Bill O'Brien instituted a prototypical West Coast style passing game. That means they leaned heavy on throws between 1 to 10 yards in the air to buy easy completions. This kind of passing game is typically thought of as a replacement for the run game. Get the ball out quickly and let your athletes run in space. Think of all the air raid teams, Mike Leach's teams, who abandoned the run game in favor of this short passing game. This stands in stark contrast with the season before. In 2023, they were bottom 5 in the country in percent of passes between 1 to 10 air yards, where they were top 20 last season. That's an increase from 24% of their passes to 44% of their passes. This short passing game mostly replaced a screen-heavy offense, a screen offense that gives a good amount of success. They were 12th in screen success rate and 36th in explosive screen rate. The next season, they only ran 16 screens out of Castellanos' 161 passing attempts. Now, this might not seem like a big deal. After all, it's not exactly changing the world to throw a handful of screens a game instead of a handful of hitches. But I think it had a fairly large impact on the success of these quarterback runs. These hitches and slants allow defenses to keep their eyes in the center of the field. It allows them to be near the box for draws, but screens can force these box defenders outwards. Let me show you an example. Castellanos has a quick release, which can get the ball out to the perimeter in a moment. This forces the overhang defenders outwards, and this is a prototypical use of the screen game. However, the screen game from the next season with Bill O'Brien didn't quite look like this. In the few screens they ran, they were typically tunnel screens, which ran back towards the quarterback. These were often blown up by the defensive line. Because of the nature of this, it's not really forcing these edge defenders outwards. There were a few times where they threw some well-designed screens, but drops and key missed blocks blew those plays up. Here's another example of a small difference that makes a big impact. In 2023, Castellanos flips the ball out to a solo receiver who has time and space to make a play. The next season, in a similar play, he has to give this token play action, which gives the defense time to converge on the screen. So I do think my original intuition was somewhat right. The key to getting Castellanos to be an effective runner is to spread the defense out to give him space. But I was wrong in where I was looking. It wasn't necessarily that the formations weren't spread out enough in the plays themselves. It was that the other plays didn't do a good job of keeping the defense honest. Bill O'Brien's offense tended to throw the ball back towards the middle of the field. That means when Thomas Castellanos dropped back for a draw, the defense felt no need to expand out to the receivers, so they could be in a good position to rally. The season before, the threat of quick screens opened running lanes and stretched defenders horizontally post-snap. So while I think Bill O'Brien did a good job of nurturing Thomas Castellanos as a passer, and he adapted the plays that allowed him to be a good runner the season before, the overall philosophy wasn't one that created as many opportunities for him to showcase his legs. Now, what does that mean for FSU going forward? The first thing is that the Noles have to bet that the fumble issue last season was an anomaly. It proved true for Cam Ward from 23 to 24, so maybe it will be true for Castellanos. It is single-handedly the biggest thing that tanked his QBR. The other thing is that they have to bet that I'm right. Malzahn's offense resembles 2023 Boston College way more than 2024. A heavy use of RPOs, screens, and exaggerated spacing should open up rushing lanes for Castellanos to gash defenses. However, as much as that sounds like a potential optimism, there's still a ton of work to do. I have to constantly remind myself that FSU had the worst offense in the country last season. There's a long way to go to even be adequate, but I think that Malzahn paired with Castellanos is a step, even if just a small step, in the right direction. Thanks for watching. I'm sorry I haven't been posting as much recently. There's a lot going on in my life. But if you want to make sure you don't miss the next one, make sure to like and subscribe, and find me over on Noles 247, where I'm constantly writing little articles and blurbs and commenting in other places. Thanks.